name is Shuaibu Danwanka. I will be speaking on holding elected representatives to account through advocacy for key reforms in the second webinar series. This webinar was organized by Policy and Legal Advocacy Center PLAC with support from USAID Scale to enhance the role of civil society organizations in the governance process through discussing ways and means of developed mechanisms that will stimulate accountability by elected representatives of the Nigerian people. I welcome you all once again. Before I start, I will wish to kindly remind you to fill the attendance sheet and evaluation form at the end of the webinar. At this juncture, very distinguished participants, I will wish to start by taking you through the slides of my presentation, holding elected representatives to account through advocacy for key reforms. Now, the objective of my presentation outline makes general introduction. It has also provided objectives for the presentation. Then I have discussed or highlighted the scope of this presentation. Then we have examined some key electoral reforms in Nigeria from 1999 to 2022. We have also developed some tools for enhancing mechanisms for public accountability. Now, at the introductory level, let me start by saying or appreciating or emphasizing the fact that public governance in Nigeria is characterized with multidimensional challenges, ranging from weak institutions incapable of making meaningful service delivery to inadequate or absence of accountability, especially by elected people's representatives. The bundle of provisions in our laws, whether laws that regulates electoral practice or laws that regulates financial expenditure, especially in the public sector, or laws that regulate the role of politicians who are elected by the people as people's representatives. These laws have contained bundle of rules and regulations that regulate powers and functions, either of institutions or public officers. The laws have not taken time to specify or regulate the roles of elected representatives in rendering accountability to the electorates of the Nigerian public. This gap escalates societal instability, clearly manifested in high poverty, despite abundant natural and human resources, dilapidated infrastructure where it exists, illiteracy despite existence of institutions like Universal Basic Education Commission, embarrassing socioeconomic crimes characterized with kidnapping and ransom, weak local government system that fails to address grassroots development, ineffective electoral process characterized with electoral offenses and volumes of litigations, and poor service delivery in virtually all public sector institutions. These and many related challenges are largely caused by absence of mechanisms in existing legal, regulatory, and institutional frameworks to subject elected representatives to account during and after service. The bundles of provisions in numerous policy and legal frameworks concentrated on providing guides for discharging statutory or organizational functions, while the major stakeholders who are elected representatives of the people have never been subjected to account by one provision of law or the other. This ridiculous gap makes development in the country lower than the standard earmarked by relevant international bodies due to Nigerians' membership of relevant bodies or current status under ratified international covenant. The performance of our elected representative has been lower than the expected standard, measured by international bodies regionally, continentally, and globally. This webinar is therefore organized against this background to discuss the variety of ways and means that will improve political accountability by elected representatives and develop mechanisms that will facilitate advocacy of key reforms in the governance process. Proceeding from this broad background of the webinar, the objective of the webinar seeks to: 1, discuss the various mechanisms by which elected representatives will be held to account and how key reforms that improve the governance process will be carried out. Provide an interactive opportunity to CSOs to discuss the consequence of absence of accountability by elected representatives and how it impacts against the development of democracy in Nigeria. It will also provide strategies to enhance CSO's capacity to engage elected political office holders towards credible electoral process and public accountability. It will also identify tools that can be used by CSOs to hold elected representatives to account to the electorate. It will further develop strategies for CSOs engagement with elected political office holders to ensure accountability in electoral and governance process. At the end of this webinar, distinguished participants, it is expected that civil society organizations' capacity would be significantly enhanced to facilitate development through effective engagement with relevant stakeholders towards ensuring accountable governance in Nigeria. The scope of this presentation covers policy issues and matters, democratic matters, and development reforms that we hope civil society organizations will identify strategic areas in our key legislations and policies to advocate for increased reform so that accountable governance would be guaranteed in Nigeria because elected representatives have been subjected to account under our existing legal, policy, regulatory, and institutional frameworks. On issues related to policy, there are several policies on virtually all sectors of governance: power, education, agriculture, women affairs, youth, foreign policy, and so on and so forth. However, most of the policies neither contain accountability mechanisms that subject elected representatives to account, nor meaningful guidelines for engagement with civil society organizations and other relevant stakeholders to ensure public accountability in Nigeria. The gaps in these policies should be studied to create room for CSO's involvement in the development, implementation, and review process. This opportunity will also give room for inclusion of accountability mechanisms, especially in policies that affect elections and management of public office by elected representatives in executive or legislative arm of government. The scope of the presentation, therefore, covers accountability by elected representative in the executive arm and the legislative arm. There is no reason whatsoever why elected representatives should not be subjected to account by containing significant provisions in our laws, which can only be successful if key reforms are carried out as may be advocated by civil society organizations and other critical stakeholders in the governance process. For the purpose of appreciating the need and reality of advocating for key reforms, we'll take the electoral reform as a case study and provide or make an examination of electoral reforms carried out in Nigeria from 1999 to 2022 to identify gaps in the existing reforms to give room for more participation and involvement of civil society organizations towards ensuring credible electoral process that will guarantee free, fair, and credible election in Nigeria. To be precise, it is important to say that there has not been too significant reform from 1999 until 2007 in Nigeria. In 2006, the Electoral Act was amended, the 2002 Act was repealed. The 2002 Act was repealed. In 2007, the National Electoral Reform Committee was set up in response to public agitations and outcry following the multiple malpractices characterized as the conduct of the general election, which convinced the then President Umar Musa Yar'Adua to declare publicly that the government will take appropriate action, which has been subjected to the setting of National Electoral Reform Committee by former Chief Justice of Nigeria, Honorable Justice Lawal West. The report of the committee contained a number of laudable recommendations that attempted to reform the electoral process as much as possible. Notable outcome
I've never tasted.
from such recommendations include enactment of the 2010 Electoral Act, which repealed the 2006 Act, alteration of the Constitution to strengthen in funding and operations, and constitutionalization of the National Industrial Code of Nigeria. However, it is sad to note that there were no provisions in both the Constitution and the Electoral Act to deal with issues of political accountability by the elected representatives of the people. All the provisions from sections 221 to 229 of the Constitution dealing with political parties. Only section 228 was altered to strengthen internal democracy in the first alteration. Similarly, the entire provisions of Part 5 dealing with political parties under section 778 to 102 of the Electoral Act 2010 and section 75 to 97 of the Electoral Act 2022. The sections do not emphasize accountable measures, either internal or external, to ensure credibility of the electoral process. Also, there has not been any significant reform to encourage periodic reports or stakeholder engagement by elected representatives. It is the degree of responsibility, patriotism, and nationalism of elected representative of the people in Nigeria that will make him to develop personal strategies that will enhance constituency relations, constituency engagement, and stakeholder dialogue that will inform the electorates, on what is going on and what is needed to be done to support his or her representative role. This gap makes elected representative in comfortable zone to isolate the electorates from the process and engage in undertakings that may not necessarily be in the interest of national development or in the interest of the electorates. In the same vein, there is no evaluation framework for benchmarking executive or parliamentary performance, either developed by political parties, INEC, or civil society organizations to utilize its outcome as basis of recall or re-election of an elected representative. Lastly, the civil society organizations have not been provided the required access to support the process in the absence of relevant framework to regulate their operations. Gladly, today, I have been privileged to attend a public hearing organized by Joint Committee of Industry, Trade and Investment, and Committee on Diaspora and NGOs on a bill for an act to amend the Companies and Allied Matters Act to primarily enhance the involvement of non-governmental organizations in the governance process. This is a key reform which should have been long advocated by civil society organizations and relevant stakeholders. These are the reforms that are expected to enhance public accountability, to enhance or to subject elected representatives to account. Notwithstanding these gaps, which manifested clear inadequate accountability by elected representatives in a country that witnessed several electoral reforms, the civil society organizations should take up the challenge to continue with advocacy for more specific reforms on areas that will ensure accountability by elected representatives in the scheme of governance. It is important to note that the existing laws and policies, as voluminous in content and beautiful in outlook as they appear to be, will never facilitate development without political accountability, and in particular, subjecting elected representatives in the executive and legislative arm to account. The members of the executive arm, especially the president, vice president, governors, and deputy governors, have enjoyed immunity against civil and criminal litigations. That constitutional immunity does not in any way prevent enactment or amendment of existing laws to contain provisions that will compel accountability by elected representatives, either through institutionalizing policy or public dialogue periodically, or through establishment of constituency office, its equipment and funding as nearly as possible, or through institutionalizing periodic constituency engagement that will bring the elected representative and constituents to operate on same page. The absence of this make representation to assume a kind of dimension that will never bring development near our country between now to the nearest future time. Political accountability by elected representatives is the only veritable tool which will guarantee efficient service delivery, development, credible electoral process, and sustainable democracy as it operates in other jurisdictions in the rest of the world. At this point, very distinguished participants to this very important webinar, it is important to highlight some tools of advocacy for key reforms to improve accountable governance by elected representatives. Some of these tools include, but not limited to, capacity development service. The civil society organizations and other stakeholders should enhance to provide capacity development service to all critical stakeholders to join in the war against ensuring that elected representatives are subjected or held to account. Institutional interface with relevant stakeholders, ensuring electoral or governance reform, not only in Nigeria, but anywhere in the world, will require interinstitutional or organizational network and collaborations with critical relevant stakeholders. This is the surest way of providing a platform that will make stakeholders articulate a common position that policymakers and legislators will rely on as basis of policy development or legislative enactment to facilitate effective reform that will make our elected representatives to account. Policy dialogue is another way or tool that is very good for facilitating effective reform. Extent of experience visits. Civil society organizations in Nigeria should not operate in isolated world. The world is, or Nigeria as a country or jurisdiction, is surviving in the shadow of globalization. They should therefore share knowledge and experience with their counterparts in the rest of the world so that the lessons learned from the experiences borrowed from other jurisdictions would be utilized to facilitate effective key sector reforms that will ensure accountability by elected representatives of the people. Participation in legislative, community, and religious issues, civil society organizations should improve in their participation in all strategic engagement, either organized by legislature, community associations, or religious-based organizations. Interorganizational collaboration and network is key towards ensuring development of a platform that will drive the reform process of ensuring accountability by elected representatives of the people. Lobby. Lobby is a very strategic tool of facilitating reform, not only in Nigeria, but anywhere in the world. Sadly, there has never been any legal framework in Nigeria that regulates lobby and lobby in parliament. However, it is one key area that will perform strategic reform, which the civil society organization should take up as a challenge and promote a legal framework that will regulate and institutionalize lobby in Nigeria so that they can use the platform to advocate for more reforms, especially on electoral and governance accountability. Media campaigns, there should be a very good collaboration between civil society organization and various media organizations to promote advocacy for key sector reforms, to promote the need for amendment of existing legal and policy framework to ensure accountability by elected representatives of the people. Courtesy calls on key public sectors. The civil society organizations shall not assume to constitute an independent world where they can operate alone. Ensuring strategic key sector reforms in Nigeria require collaboration and contact. It requires network and consultation with all relevant stakeholders. In this regard, there is a need for CSOs to provide or establish a platform that will bring them closer to all stakeholders, including traditional rulers, religious leaders, community-based leaders, students, organizations, and unions, and so on and so forth. If we are to succeed in the reform process, especially of ensuring accountability by elected representatives, there will be needs for civil society organization to appreciate the reality of utilizing all the tools and many more that have not succeeded in getting mentioned within the scope of this presentation. The CSOs and related stakeholders should embark on intense advocacy, public sensitization, analysis of existing reforms to identify gaps which credibility of both elected and governance process in the absence of accountability, policy dialogue, and several strategic stakeholders engagement to kickstart a new phase of key sector reforms that will ensure and guarantee accountable governance by elected representatives in both the legislative and executive arms of government. There is no better time than now for civil society organizations to change their strategies of contact and engagement and to assume the mantle of leadership in driving the process of key sector reforms that will guarantee political, electoral accountability by elected representatives of the people in Nigeria, so that the noble objectives of lawmaking clearly articulated by the Constitution on the authority of Section 4, subsection 2 and 7 of the 1999 Constitution of ensuring enactment of laws for peace, order, and good governance of the Federal Republic of Nigeria would be guaranteed. It is also important for civil society organizations to always remember that Section 14, subsection 2b of the 1999 Constitution clearly stipulates or confirmed provision of security and welfare of the people as the primary purpose of government. If this objective is to be achieved, if this primary of governance is to be sustained, there must be need to facilitate effective reform of existing legal policy, regulatory, and institutional framework to ensure accountability by elected representatives of the people. Very distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my sincere pleasure at this point to thank you all for your kind listening and to await your comments, contribution, questions, so that we discuss further. We continue to share knowledge and experience on this very significant subject matter, and we find a way forward to achieve the objective of the webinar. I thank you all as I anxiously await your very enterprising comments. Thank you and God bless.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Once again, thank you for this very incisive presentation. It's actually brief and straight to the point. Mine is just a comment or contribution, rather. I think the presentation has done justice to the topic. And like you mentioned earlier in the presentation, one of the issues that we we normally face with our representatives is the fact that they know there is a gap even in our legislation, and many times they exploit that gap to the fullest. And the truth be told, many times the electorates are, however, on the other hand, helpless to some extent, because when you talk about literacy, exposure, knowledge, and understanding of how these processes work, many times the majority of the population are not up to what we expect. And so it becomes difficult for them to be able to hold these representatives to account. I'll give you an example. The issue of the constituency office that you talked about. If you go to almost every constituency, these constituency offices, they exist. The politicians know for certain that it is part of their roles and responsibilities to provide these offices as a channel of communication. But do they carry out the functions for which they are actually provided? No. Most times these constituency offices are under lock and key until when it's election period like this again, then they begin to use them as a consultation venue for political meetings. But you can hardly ever say you have an issue that you need the attention of your representative and you walk to his constituency office either via a letter or even a face-to-face interaction, and you got your issue resolved. And the people actually cannot hold them accountable because many people still do not know what the function of this so-called constituency office is. And so it becomes difficult for them to even be able to hold these people to account. And so finally, my final note will be my own thoughts on how we can actually take a step forward. I think that the civil society organizations also, like you said, they have a major role to play, being that we've seen different cycles of electoral reforms. It has still continued to elude the issue of tackling this accountability head on. So this gap is left for the civil society organizations to fill. And I feel that one way that we can do that is to be deliberate. We should create these instruments that you talked about for accountability so that they can become a standard, of reference, whether for INEC or for political parties. They will not do it on their own. That is the truth. They are comfortable with the status quo and they would not want to do anything that disrupts the status quo. So I think the civil society organization should put heads together, maybe in an interactive session, a round table, develop the instrument. Let us have it that, okay, based on this set of questions, if the answer is yes or no, by these matrices, this is the rating of your legislator. By this, you can evaluate him. When we get this kind of information and literacy out to the people, and the people begin to get informed, it becomes easy when we now begin to push for legislative documentation or capturing of some of these reforms. So basically, that is my contribution. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you very much. My question is, Doctor, you've spoken very well. You've spoken extensively about how we can advance our engagement in terms of reform and accountability. Well, Doctor, my question is, since the local government election is part of our electoral process, how can we locally engage the conversation at the grassroots? Because some of our key voters or key people are in the communities, the ward, and in their units. They are having challenges about engagement on constituency. For example, a councillor, let's start from the councillor down to the assembly member. They don't even have a constituency office in the local government. And most of the times, comes to election, people can only identify political party based on their logo. They don't even know what it stands for and all that. So how can we engage more in the community engagement so that people will be well informed? Thank you.
I want to appreciate you for the well-aligned presentation. Yes. Okay, well, mine is going to be like, okay, I have two comments basically, more like a contribution. Now, well, over time now, we've had talks, of course, at different fora that how to hold our representative accountable for all their dealings while in the political office. Well, I want to say that in my own view now, I would like to shake the table right now to say that, well, I don't think the masses, the people out there doing the village and rural areas and all that in the city as well, are well informed as to what indeed they are supposed to demand from their representatives. So I will say this now, in fact, that, well, I've had discussions also with one or two legislators also, and then you keep seeing that, well, the demands that come from the masses to them, from their electorate, their constituents to them, is basically personal and not that which is actually required of them. An instance, you see, most times the requests that come from that comes to legislators will be that, okay, they have personal requests that their wife is sick, or their daughter is getting married and all that, so they want financial contribution. Whereas getting it all wrong, that if your wife is sick, ordinarily what you should be demanding from your legislator or from your representatives, so the fact that that person should attract some basic social amenities like hospitals, clinic to your community, so you can help tackle that issue. But there's a misplaced priority to the fact that they now go ahead to now request for personal needs. So I feel like in your presentation, you talked about media campaign. I think this is where the media campaign is to come into effect. And then, yes, also supported by the civil society, it should be promoted. And also, yes, and also the National Orientation Agency. I think there's an agency like that under the Ministry of Information also, that there should be an orientation and awareness program that will really create awareness to the masses that that the particular things that they need to demand from their representative at every level. Yes, and a spin-off also, a contribution from what Mr. Nanven said, is the fact that, yes, most of all these constituent offices that you see I think I heard of one also in my state that the grass is just all over the constituent office because the legislator has not been there since he was elected. So these are basically some of the issues there. And then second, lastly, my contribution is to the fact that I don't know, it is in my view that there's actually a legislation right now that gives us that leverage to hold our representatives accountable. And I think that should be the Freedom of Information Act 2011. Yes, I'm not sure of the year, but I think the act, the Freedom of Information Act. So this Freedom of Information Act, yes, basically gives every individual organization the right to demand for some particular information, to demand for some data and all that from public office holders, from government organizations and the rest, and then to find out, okay, what has been their dealings for the past, for a given period of time. And then you make that demand, you write letters, and then where you request for all this information, and where this information is not provided to you, that same particular act also gives you the power to institute a legal action against that organization that has refused you those information that you've asked. So I think we can equally, civil society organizations and even individuals can actually leverage on that also to demand accountability from their representatives. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your well articulated presentation. For me, just a few comments that I want to make. We know that for us, particularly we that work at the grassroots areas, the major challenge there is that getting the representatives in their offices. Like my colleagues have said earlier, the offices are there, but you visit the offices 10 times, 20 times, you will not see anyone. The highest you could see maybe some of the few people or SS that they are put in there, and that they cannot give you tangible information where those representatives are. And then the other thing I know for us at the grassroots, we've helped the communities where we're working with to develop what is called community scorecard. And in that community scorecard, the essence of it is so that the communities can use to engage their duty bearers, their representatives, share with them their basic needs so that at least they can come in for assistance. But most of the times, even if they are lucky to meet them and share with them those scorecards, you will discover that it's just a fake promise they will make. And at the end of the day, very rare you find that something is happening. They cannot come to their aid. So I look at those challenges basically is coming as a result of some certain frameworks that have not been put in place. Like my colleague have said, that's Celzing, pertaining some of those frameworks. For I feel if some of those frameworks can be shared, if at all you have, with us other ways of engaging them. But I know the basic major ways of engaging them, and particularly is creating awareness between the duty bearers and the electorates. That's going to help a lot. And also, you know, that also calls for some certain logistics that have to be put in place. So I pray that you will also critically look at those areas and at the same time share with us how we can go about with those people that are not ready to engage their electorates, because it's very, very key. I didn't see a reason why somebody would be elected. Since he's elected, he doesn't come to his constituency, talk less of giving listening ears to the electorates, which is very, very bad. And at the same time, after 4 years, without shame, such kind of people will still come back and are vying or canvassing for election again. So the CSOs together, I think we need to put our heads together and come out with certain things that will also help us to forge a way forward. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name is Donatus. If my contribution, I don't have a question, I only have a contribution. And my contribution, first of all, will be based on the fact that I have a ground experience on the legislative constituent relations. I'm currently an intern with Edo State Itako Federal Constituency, courtesy of the Yagas group. So I understand some of these dynamics. First, I want to say that there is a high level of disconnect between the legislators and the constituents. And it is as a result of bad governance. You cannot expect people to come and hold legislators accountable when poverty is rife. You cannot expect people to hold legislators accountable when they cannot even think normally. So first of all, the question of governance, is governance people-centered? It is a critical question. When governance is not about the people seek not to think about governance. So who therefore holds the legislator accountable? There's nobody. So we literally operate there's a way we call it in politics. We have civic political culture. We have a subject parochial. Nigeria is a subject parochial society. Where citizens don't care about what happens politically, they just do what they like. So I think, first of all, the first point of call is to address the issue of governance. The issue of running away with our common national words should stop. Governance should be about helping to make the people's life better, securing lives and, securing lives of the people and their properties. Then again, I think to hold legislators accountable, we should start thinking about how to educate citizens to know that, first of all, for somebody to be accountable, you need to know what the person should be doing. You cannot be telling a legislator he's not accountable because you ask him to give you money for a birthday party, or because, for example, I was working with my boss recently. We were accosted on the road, and somebody told us that he just came back from the hospital not so long, some few weeks back, and he had an operation. Ordinarily, that means he is expecting that my boss's office should have probably paid for that hospital bill or something. These are wrong demands from the wrong platforms. A legislature represents, makes laws, and oversight. So why do you ask him to give you money for hospital ordinarily? So you can also see that there is also another disconnect between what is the mandate of a legislator. First of all, before we talk about holding them accountable, because you will hold them accountable wrongly if you don't know what they should be doing. So these are the critical issues. And this calls for the civil society, because if the people are not educated, they cannot know how to hold the legislators responsible. And who are to educate them? The government, of course, will not educate them. Is it the civil society that will still do that? So I think there is a lot of work to engage the citizenry, to know who a legislator is and what is expected of them. Then again, if we want to start holding them accountable, we should go and know how to recall a legislator. Nobody have ever been recalled in this country, and so many people are messing up. Have Nigerians really recalled a senator before, or an House of Rep member? No, because why? First of all, the people are disconnected. They are badly educated. They don't even know what the government is all about. So I think there's need more enlightenment. The NOA should come in. Civil society should not give up. The people should be educated. A very synergy between the civil society and the people, because sometimes they cannot skyrocket their voices. But when there is a platform from which they can, add voices, then it will be easy. So this is where the civil society comes in, partnering the ordinary men to take up their voices upwards, because sometimes they don't even have the power to shout or to take their complaints to where they are needed. So that's just the little I want to add. And in summary, it's about governance. It's about a stronger synergy between the civil society and the people. And again, the issue of recalling people that are not accountable. Then again, what is the role of a legislature, first of all? Thank you very much, Doc.
So I'm Oji, I work with Proactive Gender Initiative.
Okay.
My contribution would somehow stem from what the last speaker has said. In fact, it adds to what every other person has talked about: bad governance, the disconnect between the legislature and the citizenry, and all what's not has been mentioned. The only people who are empowered by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to hold legislatures accountable are the citizens. These are the ultimate persons who our constitution has given that power, ultimate power to hold them account, are these citizens. And then on the other hand, the section which gives this power somehow still robs them of that power. If the legislatures are not held accountable, they cannot also hold the executive to account, and also the legislature, the judiciary, sorry. What is this section I'm talking about? I'm talking about the section 69 that talks about the recall proceedings. I will read something to you, the last paragraph. It says that a petition will be presented to INEC that is signed by more than half of registered voters in that reps constituency. Check out the history of our democracy. We have never had up to that number of persons vote in any Nigerian election. This is data, this is facts. We have never had that number vote. And to even make the thing more ridiculous, it now says that which signatures that INEC, we have to verify these signatures. INEC that has not finished perfecting the accreditation process will now come to verify signature. How preposterous is that? I believe that in the era of constitutional amendments, this section 69 and section 110 should be reformed. That is our primary tool of accountability as citizens in Nigeria. And as long as these sections rob us of that power, there is really nothing you can do. Complain your rep has done this, your rep has done that, your rep has done this one. What will happen? You can't do nothing to him. Unless these sections are reformed to return power to the people, we will continue complaining of these things we are complaining till our great-grandchildren will come. And they'll still complain of these same things. Because with this provision, it is impossible. I say it is impossible. Mark my word, it is impossible to recall any senator or hold them, any senator, House of Reps member or State of Assembly member to account. You can't recall them when they are not acting in your interest. Let me now tell you something. You send somebody to go and represent you at this place. At the time you're sending them there, you really don't know what they are going to do. You don't know how they are going to perform. They might have track records which will inform you, to be able to forecast, maybe they will do well based on their track record. But the truth is, you can't tell what will happen. That is where this section 69 comes in. If we have sent you there and you're not doing our interest, how do we now tell you this is what we want you to do? Or how do we even tell you, come back, you're not doing what we like? It is this section 69, that's our ultimate power. And if it remains this way, the citizens will remain powerless. Governance will continue to be disconnected, and the system will further deteriorate until we reform section 69 and section 110 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. I believe this should be our primary focus as CSO in the next wave of constitutional amendments. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your presentation. It's really an eye opener, and I appreciate a lot. But when we talk about representation, I think most time the people or the community or the citizens sending the people out there to represent them have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of work to do. Yeah, one person is representing thousands, a lot of community combined together. And the challenge is, how do we make him accountable or her accountable at the place of representation? Most times we see that when they come back, they represent a very few sets of people, not just everyone. So it's the issue of accountability, transparency to those group of persons, the committee, the people that sent you out for that representation is very vital. But how do the community, how do the citizens bring or call these people to come and give an account of what they've done? Because the challenge we have is that problem of that gap that exists. Those at the top there, once they get there, they see a gap that they're no longer equal to what is happening to people behind. Look at what is happening in Nigeria. When campaign is coming, you see those that want to be elected, they come low to people, see them eating go to Buka. You see them go to Bukateria, go to canteens with the people they want to represent. But once they get there, they don't come back again. So how do we make them accountable to still come back when they get there? How do we make them come back to the people?
Yes, I think at this time will be good to conclude. However, I will wish to make some few remarks or comments on some of the responses made by participants. Yeah, I think Samuel, let me start with Samuel. No, not Samuel, it was Namben. Namben has spoken well on the need to ensure that constituency offices exist and function properly. It is true to say that at the moment, while constituency offices exist in various state and federal constituency offices, most of them are not functional. And the question is, how do we make them functional? How do we institutionalize the constituency offices? And how do we ensure that constituency offices are open at all the times and not necessarily during period of election? I think this is very critical. And what is to be done is for civil society organizations and indeed the general public. We should take it as a challenge and devise means of ensuring reform in our existing legal and policy instruments to institutionalize the establishment and functionality of constituency offices. The instrument of accountability that may be created by civil society organizations, as suggested by some contributors here, will include coming up or developing scorecards for elected representatives. But beyond the issue of coming up with scorecards, I think the major role to play is for civil society organizations to continue to discharge advocacy on diversified reform, key sector reforms. And after that is done and has succeeded, then the relevant instrument will be reformed, subjected to amendment or enactment of new ones will emerge. This will now give civil society organizations the opportunity to make further contacts and ensure that whoever is elected is not only elected on the basis that he has satisfied constitutional requirements, but is elected with knowledge at the back of his mind that whatever he does is subject to accountability. And the accountability will be such that if he has never done it well, he may either be recalled or may not be re-elected. The provisions of Section 110 and Section 69 of the Constitution dealing with issues related to recall is very important, and I will agree with you, it requires some modification. And since the constitutional alteration is an ongoing project, if civil society organizations promote a bill or proposal that will facilitate amendment of those provisions, it will require to be action in right direction. Again, the issue, critical issues, revolutionary, raised by Donatus of rising high level disconnect between elected representative and the electorate. Yes, there is disconnect. Many electorates do not appreciate or understand the basic constitutional role of legislators, while the legislators too are not too keen to return, to visit, to consult, and to render accountability that will bring democracy dividend in front of people's house in the various constituencies. So disconnect is very high. And how do we address this disconnect? The role of civil society comes into play and other stakeholders. You should embark on a massive campaign, massive mobilization, massive creation of awareness through diversified capacity development services to educate the electorates to know their limit, their bounds, their role, and to educate the elected representative on what they are expected to do, so that the two critical stakeholders will operate on the same page. Again, there is, this is a typical Nigerian problem. Constituents, in most cases, are fond of making outrageous claims and demands. Again, constituents have elected representatives to attend to certain petty and personal needs. You know, these are not actually healthy for democratic development and for ensuring that elected representatives do what is expected of them as constitutionally enshrined. However, again, there may be need for awareness. Many constituents may not be involved in this kind of attitude or conduct only and only if they have been sufficiently educated to appreciate the reality of ensuring reform that will bring development in the society. Bringing development in terms of establishment of infrastructure, maintenance of infrastructure, renovation of infrastructure, subsidizing education, subsidizing health services, provision of energy to sustain local and small-scale enterprises will be much better than asking elected representative of small amount of money that will never satisfy your needs. So the civil society organizations, again, have significant role to play in educating the general public on what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. Then, lastly, I think I will consolidate comments by Oji, comments by Ibonk Ekane, comment by Okutepa, and comment by Sizing to say that, while it is a fact that is worth acknowledging that there is misplacement of priority by constituents to address critical issues in putting up claims and demands to elected representatives, while there is, Freedom of Information Act has compelled the release of public information to critical stakeholders, and also, while it is also good to appreciate the reality that, certain constitutional provision will need to be amended. And finally, while it is also good and realistic to acknowledge the fact that the issue of accountability should address the fundamental reality of the way and manner we conduct our election, we relate with our elected representatives, it is important in the final analysis to remind civil society organizations and other relevant stakeholders that the responsibility of ensuring key sector reforms, particularly of existing laws and policies, to ensure and guarantee realistic subjecting elected representatives to account rest on our shoulder as a collective responsibility. We either do it now or we forget about ensuring development and good governance. Those who are elected into political office may not be keen about ensuring reform of existing instruments which regulate the functionality of their office and entitlements. The responsibility rests largely on civil society organizations, the media, the general public that are informed, and other critical stakeholders. The elected representatives are mostly keen and will be ready to respond to public need and public outcry of reform that will bring about development, only and only if the critical stakeholders championed by civil society organizations take up the challenge and lead the process. If that is done, I think we will not only make progress in this regard and direction, but we will see Nigeria growing faster than we expect. And the good governance that has been mentioned all over our constitutional provision, the electoral credibility that we're expecting will be very much around the corner. It is time to develop mechanisms that will facilitate this process so that we make progress. Distinguished participants, I want to use this opportunity to thank you once again, for your participation and to also remind you to fill your attendance sheet, and don't forget to complete your evaluation form. It is my honor and privilege at this point to thank Plug and USET Scale for organizing this very important webinar on critical national issue. And I hope the organizers will continue to provide this opportunity not only to civil society organizations in Nigeria, but to all critical stakeholders, including elected representatives of the people, so that the governance process will be improved and development will be all over the country. I thank you all, and I say bye.